All right, well, I'm glad to see everybody. We're up here. Great. Terrific. Thank you, Kim, for getting up there. Hang on a second. Let's see if we're in the right place. Can I move this?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We're beyond that.
I'm hearing noise from someone.
I'll
I
mute.
will mute.
I will mute.
There, that went away. No.
Okay. I think we're right here. The Gemara proceeds to relate what happened to each of them. Yeah, okay, this is good. All right, let's say the bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. Okay, let's read the paragraph beginning, the Gemara proceeds to relate. Who would like to read? Hello?
I'll do it if no one else wants to.
Okay, Phil, thank you.
The Gemara proceeds to relate what happened to each of them. Ben Azai glimpsed at the divine presence and died. And with regard to him, the verse states, precious in the eyes of the Lord is the death of his pious ones. Ben Zoma glimpsed at the divine presence and was harmed. He lost his mind. And with regard to him, the verse states, have you found honey? Eat as much as is sufficient for you, lest you become full from it and vomit it. Acher chopped down the shoots of saplings. In other words, he became a heretic. Rabbi Akiva came out safely.
Okay, so these four outcomes are important to us because there are four different ways in which we react to confrontation with truth, or in general, or with divine truth in particular. Remember, we're dealing with an image where there are reflecting pools, and each of the four rabbis go into the Pardes, looks into the reflecting pools, and what they see is what leads to their fate. Okay, so of these four rabbis, and as I glimpsed the divine presence and died. Now, where do we know about glimpsing the divine presence? Have you heard anything about this? Elsewhere? Where?
Apparently it'll kill you.
No,
Yeah, well,
when they go get the tablet.
yeah, on Mount Sinai, Moses goes up and does not view God directly.
He sees his feet or something, right?
Well,
Or is it, I guess
well, what exactly he saw is not entirely clear, but God hides in the cleft of the rock, or Moses rather hides in the cleft of the rock, and he sees the effect of God passing for him, but doesn't see God directly. Why would that be, by the way?
well, I think it's a beautiful metaphor that we can't know God
Right.
clearly.
Yeah, the issue, that's exactly where I was going with this, Kim. The issue is, what can we know of God? What can we see of what God does even? And this is something that I agree with you, Kim. It's a very powerful sort of question. How do we know that God is present?
Well, how about the Shekinah? Isn't she the God's presence on earth? But we don't see her either.
Well,
The
yeah,
actions are what we see, the results.
yeah, we see the effects,
Yeah.
and we can attribute the effects to God, but we don't see God directly. We don't see the Shekhinah directly either. Um, but there's a different relationship with the Shekhinah. Uh, there is a different kind of connection. But in either case, we don't see God directly. We see God's aftermath. One way of viewing this, and those of you who are real scientists will, I'm sure, find fault in how I relate this, but I'll do the best I can. Um, there's something called a cloud chamber, which is used by physicists. Uh, you can see in a cloud chamber the pathway of, I believe it's electrons, in a particular chunk of matter. You can't see the electrons themselves, but you can see their pathway. If you look into the cloud chamber, you can see where they have been, but you don't look at them directly. This idea that we don't see things, there's much in our experience that we don't see directly, but we do see the effect, or we see the aftermath, or we see the impact of something. And therefore we posit the existence of whatever it is that caused the effect that we're looking at. This is a classic way of thinking about connecting with God. We don't see God directly, but we see what God does, or we see the impact of God's actions, or we see more return of mind of this sort. We see the impact of God's words, but not God directly. One of the problems with these four is, and this is about what this whole story is about, is looking at trying to see God directly. What's the problem? Why would people want to see God directly? Why wouldn't it be enough, from a philosophical point of view, just to see the effects of what God does, or the effects of God's presence? What's the difference?
Proof?
Okay, what do you mean by proof, Phil?
Well, that there actually is a God.
Yeah, and there, what's lacking from looking at the impact of what God does that leads one or another of us to say, that's not enough. I want to see God directly.
Well, there can be alternate explanations for what happens other than a God made it happen.
Yeah, I think that's well put. And when we are talking about ourselves, and when we're talking about other people, there's a similar issue. We say, do you really know yourself? Do I know you? Can we really know, let's say, another person, your wife, your son, your daughter, your father, your mother? Can you really know them, or do you only know what they do or what they say? We can't. Can you really see into and connect with another person's soul? Can you really get at and directly encounter their truth or their essence, if you like? Of course, the answer is that we can't do that directly. There is a gulf, however small it may be, between what we, the actuality of that person, their essence, their being, if you like, and what they do and they say. We only know the latter, however intimate our knowledge of that other person is, and that applies to ourselves. Can we really see directly and encounter directly who we are? No, who we are is, the best we can do is what we say and what we do. But there is some elusive core that remains beyond our direct experience. So when we're talking about change, growth, and so forth in ourselves, what we can look at is only what we do and the effects of what we do. The core itself, the essence itself, remains beyond our experience. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, depends on how you look at it. I know, and those of you who are married, who have been married, probably know that the quickest way to an argument with your spouse is to say, oh, I know exactly who and what you are. There's no mystery to you. I have understood you completely, and there's nothing left for me to understand. I've got it down 100%. The moment you say that there's nothing about them that you don't already know, you're on the road to an argument. I think this is part of our problem. We want to know more about other people. We want to know more about ourselves. And yet there is, and there should be, a gulf, a gap between what we know and the reality or the essence of ourselves, of other people, and so forth. When Buber talks about the I-thou relationship and the I-it relationship, this is a point that he is scrupulous about making. We don't know the person himself or herself. We know very intimately and very closely what they are, but not who they are. That's the difference between an I-it and I-thou relationship, if you like to look at it that way. Okay, so Ben Azai glimpsed the divine presence and died. What does it mean that he died? We could be, talking about an actual physical death, I suppose. But if it's not an actual physical death, in what way do we die when we encounter or even glimpse the ultimate truth, the divine presence of God? What could that possibly mean?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How does one do that?
This is a great question, Phil. And this metaphor of going into the pardes, the garden or the orchard or the divine domain, if you like, is a metaphor for all that. And what's interesting is when it's set up, you remember the beginning of this passage, there is no description of how the four do exactly that. The question would be, it's not specified. And this is itself an interesting point. How do we come to know anything? Another person, ourselves, an object in the world, and so forth. There are many different ways to experience it. But it doesn't, from the standpoint of this question, it doesn't matter. None of them, except in these four interesting, exceptional cases, gets us to know the essence and the ultimate reality behind anything. Or what you can put it a different way. There are probably a million ways that you could try to enter into the realm of divine truth. For the vast majority of us, whatever method we use is not going to be successful. We might learn something more, but we don't encounter God's presence directly. But somehow these four were able to do so. Was that a good thing? Well, maybe not, because it left three of them severely disabled or damaged. That's what I want to say. So you could imagine, let's say you're studying Torah and you try to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the text, and you get closer and closer and closer. But no matter how much you study Torah, you're not going to actually encounter God himself. Even Moses, who received the Torah from God, doesn't encounter God directly. And if you ask yourself the question, well, why isn't that? Why? There are other religions in the world where you can, according to that religion, encounter God directly. In mystical circles, in many different religions, including Christianity, it's possible to do that. You come up with a vision or an image or an encounter with Jesus or what have you. That's not all that exceptional. But the question is, can that really be possible? From the Jewish point of view, no. You might think you are doing that, but that is a delusion. If you think you have encountered God directly, you are mistaken. You have mistaken the appearance in the reflecting pool for God himself. So the question, to answer your question, Phil, if I'm understanding your question correctly, is that this passage is here to remind us that there is a limit to human knowledge. And that limit is one which can be expressed by saying, we don't ever see the truth completely and directly. We can get closer and closer to it and encompass more and more of it, but even so, the totality is beyond our ken. So what we are looking at here is a story which talks about the confusion of these four great sages. If this is the situation with them, how much more so is the situation with us? In their attempt to encounter God, three of them met failure, and the failure was destructive. Only one is unaffected negatively. Only one is not destroyed, and that's Akiva, and we'll get to that. All right. Does that answer your question at all, Phil?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Now,
All right. So
I wanted to point out this poem by Emily Dickinson in the first stanza. Can you see it?
I need to get my readers. I can't read it.
Success is counted sweetest by those who ne'er succeed. To comprehend a nectar requires sorest need. I think it's the same idea. To comprehend a nectar requires the sorest need. That we kind of feel it if we want to comprehend it as opposed to experience it.
Yes, there is a difference there, and that's a good point, because when Buber talks about the I-thou relationship, you can have an I-thou relationship with another person, with God, and so forth. But when you try to translate that into the realm of language, it becomes a failure. You can't express the full truth that you encounter, and all the nuances and so forth. Once you begin to try to express it, and you move now into the analytic mode, uh, there is a kind of distortion. This is not to put too fine a point on it, but this is one way of talking about, kind of poetic way of talking about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. You can, which is one of the building blocks of modern physics, that if we try to observe something, we try to know it, to comprehend it, we change it. And we change it either because either that it becomes something else or it moves position. That's sort of basically Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. You can't see the atoms in, or whatever sort of atomic particles we're talking about, directly without changing them. So if you look, talking about how that applies to how it relates to understanding ourselves or understanding another person, if we were to try to encounter their truth or our own truth fully, in the very act of trying to do that, we change things. So it's, there used to be a song many years ago, which I love to cite. I wish that I could shimmy like my sister Kate. She shakes just like jelly on a plate. And the point of the song is, in very strange language, is that you can't ever pin down who Sister Kate is. When you try, it's like Jello, it moves around and you can't actually to spirit, If you've ever tried to eat Jello, it's exactly like that. You take your fork, you poke it in, and it just moves it around. All right, so these four great rabbis try to move beyond the normal limitations of our ability to know another, or the other. And in doing so, the impact of that, or the effect of that, is negative. How is it negative? Because we think we know something that we don't actually know. We are dealing with illusion or delusion, if you prefer. So, in what way does Ben Azai die? What does it mean when the text says that he dies? Personally, I don't think it's a physical death.
The spirit died.
Yeah, what do you mean by that, Kim? That's a good response. What do you mean?
Well, it happens when you become so analytical.
Yes.
I've heard art historians talk about paintings, and they dissect it to the point where there's nothing left in terms of feeling, or in terms of the experience of the painting. They tear it apart so much.
I think that that's a very good point. And one way that it applies directly to our question, namely, how do we improve? How do we learn? How do we grow? Is that for good and for ill, we don't ever encounter ourselves, so to speak, in their entirety. There's something always left to find out. There's some element of growth to encounter, to experience. We never get to the end of that process of growth and change, which can be frustrating if you think the point is to get to the end, to reach some sort of static level of understanding or self-development. And that's the end of the process, and we can all go home. The point is that we don't ever reach such a state of completion.
I asked this about, my sister was a psychoanalyst, and I would ask this of her, do you ever get to the bottom?
Yeah.
And she would say, no, it just keeps opening up and opening up.
I think I agree with your sister, and I think I would have liked her. I think that's exactly the point. Now, this may lead to a certain level of frustration, because no matter how hard we work on ourselves or how much we strive to understand another person or a phenomenon we encounter in the world, we will never entirely exhaust its meaning, exhaust our own meaning, if we're talking about our own growth. And there is a point at which we might say that our patience with this process is tested. All right, it's enough already. When do I get to the end? When do I achieve nirvana? When do I become? When do I encompass the divine truth that exists inside of us and other people, and so on and so forth?
Well, something kind of from a Buddhist perspective, it would be when you become okay with that you can't know.
Exactly. That's exactly my point, Kim. At a certain point, you have to understand that this process is what there is. And the end of the process is always going to be beyond us. The rabbis talk about this in terms of the biblical text, and they pose the question, why doesn't the text begin with the letter Aleph? Why does it begin with the letter Bet? No, it's not the first letter of the alphabet, but the second. And the answer in the Midrash is because we don't ever know the beginning. We don't ever know the most basic. You can't see into the process of creation to see the entire thing. You only see the second level, the outcome. And that's true dealing with ourselves and so forth. So in the end, wisdom comes from recognizing that this process is ongoing and that is of something valuable. All right. I don't want to be a dead horse. There's more we can say here, but I want to move on. So the death that encounters is what? The death of not of the physical person, not even of the metaphorical or the allegorical or not symbolic person. The death is the death of this person who is the perfected end of the process. That person, the idea that we have that we're going to reach the end of development and growth, that goal, that person doesn't exist and will never exist. You have to get rid of that idea because it is a snare. It distracts us, it derails us from the process of growth. Am I being clear? Anybody?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great. Okay, so let's move on. So there's Ben Zoma glimpsed the divine presence and was harmed. He lost his mind. And with regard to him, the verse states, "If you found honey, eat as much as is sufficient for you, lest you become full from it and vomit it." So what is, in what manner can we say that it is it's an attempt to know the truth or to know the most basic constituents of ourselves or of other people or of an entity or a process, that leads to kind of insanity? What do they mean by this insanity? What's the metaphor they have here? Eating too much of a good thing, so to speak, which leads us to illness, to specifically to vomiting what we have consumed. What do you think they mean by that? In what sense can exploration for ourselves lead to surfeit? How can we possibly know too much?
It's funny that we have the expression, "You're full of it."
Okay. Yeah, that's not a compliment, is it? Well, what do you mean by that expression, Kim?
I don't know. You are so stuck
Yeah,
on a certain thing you believe in that you can't see other ways.
I think you're on the right track. Yeah, I would might use a little bit different language, but I would agree with you. What is it? It's an ironic usage. When you say you're full of it, you mean you have too much. Okay.
Too much of yourself.
Well, of whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know. So, and when human beings are too full of something, they vomit it. They lose whatever it is that they've consumed. Am I being clear with that? So,
Yeah.
so go ahead, Judith.
It's if you reach a certain point which is just right for you, and if you try to go beyond that, this one went crazy. I see that personally when I realize that I'm not as brilliant as I would like to be, and at this point it doesn't matter, and that's probably true with any adjective I would put to myself, that I'm not as I would like to be. And I think that's true for all humanity. We need to accept who we are and at what level we are, and if that's okay.
Yeah, I think you're right. But now, Judith, I want to make sure you understand. You are plenty brilliant,
Yeah, well,
but you're even more brilliant to recognize that even so, there are limitations. And the limitations are generic. They're not just limitations that Judith has or that Kerry has or any of us. They are limitations that human beings have. We might encounter them as personal, but that is itself a kind of delusion. But because this is, what are the limits of human knowledge? What are the limits of human acquaintance, not only with others, but with ourselves? How deeply, how completely can we know ourselves? How fully do we ever comprehend the world around us? And the answer is, we can't fully know it. That's generically beyond what we can do. Now, we might think we want to push beyond that. And the desire to push beyond that can have positive results. We learn more, we understand more. But at the same time, you have to recognize that that more that we understand is not the end of the process. So we continue to push. If we think that we, at any one stage, reach the end of the process of personal growth or whatever, of improvement, we have made a mistake. And if you think of yourself as fully sufficient in that way, you have lost what you have learned. The idea that we are constantly moving forward, or we can constantly move forward, and there's always a new frontier, sort of the Star Trek formulation, that's a good thing to recognize, even though it leads to frustration. It doesn't lead to losing the truths we have already won with our effort. So imagine this. You're in the process of trying to discover who and what you are and plumbing the depth of your soul, or looking at another person and trying to figure out who they are in their most essential selves. And we think we get to the end of the process. We got it. And once we think we got it, we don't got it. That's exactly the dilemma. And once you think you got it, you don't got it, and now you've lost whatever it is you've learned along the way. You've made the fatal mistake of mistaking something incomplete for the whole thing. this has to do with the idea of idolatry. When we think that some image or partial truth is the whole thing, we've made that fatal mistake. It's like we were to say, okay, we've achieved a certain self-knowledge, and that is all that there is. Well, we haven't. We're like the asymptote in mathematics. We can get, or Zeno's paradox, if you prefer. We get infinitely close, but there remains a gap between that last point and the axis. It is we are infinitely far, even though we are infinitely close. That'd be one way, ironic way of putting it.
Yeah, that's why we take these classes.
Yeah, I think that's why I teach them, because I'm doing the same thing. You know, so yeah, I mean, the idea is that there is more to be found, and yet we can't fall victim to the idea that at any one point along the way, we have exhausted the meaning of ourselves or of other people. We have never grasped the truth. We constantly expand the truth that we know, but we are aware of the gap, the gulf between that truth and the thing itself. So Benzoma falls prey to this. He neglects to understand that you can't fill yourself more than you are capable of holding. That's the limitation. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
It strikes me, Rabbi, and I'd ask if you agree, that being a born-again Christian would be the opposite of what we're talking about. I have found it, and that is that.
Okay, so we're going to engage in what one of my professors used to call a fruitful aside. Okay? And so we're going to bracket this discussion that we're about to have, and we're not going to repeat this on Brotherhood Shabbat, okay? On one level, if you ask me, is Christianity a true religion? Is what we learn, or what people learn from Christianity, true? My answer is yes, of course it is. At the same time, that mistake that Phil is pointing to is often made. It is the enticement that Benzoma falls prey to. He wants to encounter the truth which exhausts the category of truth. And that is a problem. When you think you have grasped the entirety of truth, you have lost whatever you have learned in the way. So if you ask me, apropos of Phil's question, what is the mistake, or what is the flaw in the argument from born-again Christians, so to speak? It often is exactly that point, that they mistake the part that they know for the whole. It is a kind of, and here's the word I wouldn't use on Brotherhood Shabbat, it's a kind of idolatry. Our particular understanding, any one of us, or even all of us, at any one point or time, does not exhaust the category of meaning. There is something always beyond what we have encompassed within our own understanding. So when somebody says, I have encountered Jesus and that's all that there is, they're making the mistake that Benzoma made. And it's very hard to point this out to other people. because what what they are getting out of, well, let me back it up. What do people get out of thinking that what they know or what they've encountered or the truth that they hold is all the truth? What do they get out of it? Why won't they give that idea up? Why is it so difficult for people to live with the actuality that they don't know everything, they haven't encountered everything, they haven't discovered the complete truth? What's the problem with that for people?
Well, one truth is what's going to happen. And
Okay.
people have a lot of fear of the future and a lot of anxiety because they don't know how things are going to turn out.
So thinking that they have discovered the entirety of who they are themselves or the truth or whatever it is, there's a certain element of security in that.
Yeah, sure.
But it's a false sense of security because they have not actually accomplished what they think they've accomplished, because what they would like to accomplish is not possible. It's beyond the ken of human beings. But the temptation to say that it is something that is possible and that you've achieved it is very seductive. You know, all of us go through life with lots of uncertainty, especially these days. It's the world, the experience, our experience is rife with uncertainty, and people get tired. They want to rest from this process. They can't live with another day of not knowing what the hell is going to happen. They can't live with another day of not knowing what the outcome will be. And so they want to end it. Damn the protocols, I'm going to the movies. Whatever it is, people reach a point of exhaustion.
I mean, that's what Trump is trying to sell us with the vaccine.
That's right.
There will be a vaccine by the second week of whatever.
The 12th of never. Anybody remember that old song?
Oh, absolutely. I love Johnny Mathis.
That's the low. The 12th of never. Yeah, really. You think this is something far away? Well, try getting to the 12th of never.
It also strikes me, Rabbi, that who wants to admit that what they have either been taught or accepted in the root of their soul is wrong? So another reason why you would not want to be told or even introduced to the possibility that you're wrong.
Well, we might quibble about this, Phil, whether it's wrong or simply insufficient. But in either way, we're making a basic mistake, and the mistake is mistaking the part for the whole. So yeah, I mean, I really agree with you, and what I'm saying is just a quibble about language. I think you're hitting something very very important, Phil, in that comment, and I thank you for it. I mean, what the problem for us is for all human beings, not just us, is how do we live with incompleteness? How do we live with not achieving the state of being or the position in life or the understanding or the knowledge that we want to have? And when I was a kid, I used to fantasize when I was going to school that maybe there would be a smart pill. And all I'd have to do is take the smart pill, and I would know everything I have to know. I'm sure I'm not the only person who had this image in their minds. When will I become the perfect student? When will I become be able to play a musical instrument and do so that what I'm playing is an exact completion of the music that's in my mind? If you talk to, I have a cousin who is a well-known conductor. His name is Robert Baker. And he goes all over the world, conducting symphony orchestras and operas and so on and so forth. He's really quite an excellent musician. But even he will say he is never, with all the work he's done, and he's conducted symphony orchestras everywhere, he has never been able to work with an orchestra and produce a performance which meets every dimension of what it would be to be would be if it were a perfect instantiation of the composer's music. It never happens. Now, is that because people make mistakes? No, it's because it's the nature of trying to reproduce what Plato calls the forms. You have a chair. We recognize that it's a chair, says Plato, because it coheres with a picture in our mind of what a chair is. But is it the same as the image or the mental construct of chair? And the answer is no, because there are many possibilities that might do that. No one of them exhausts the category of chair. Now, this works with just about anything. Well, not just about. It actually works with everything we think about. So the trap in this process of personal growth is that we begin to think at some point that we have reached the fulfillment of this process, and that who we are at the moment is the perfect us. The Mussar movement constantly presses us to push further. That's why you study with another person, because there is no point at which a question can't be asked, and then, or what's next, or what's missing. There is always such a question, and an answer to that question is something we go in search of. And even as we come up with a possible answer, it's only a possible answer. There is still a gap between what we have come to know and knowing the complete truth. That either makes you nuts or leads to a kind of defeat, as in the first cases of Ben Azai and Ben Zoma, or you recognize that that is endemic to the process and press on. Okay, so having said that, we're almost at the end of our time. Gosh, I'm not going to get to the last two.
Curious about this word precious. Why? Precious in the eyes of the Lord is the death of his pious ones.
Yes.
So why would precious means that this person did the wrong thing, Isaiah? I mean, he went too far.
Right.
By glimpsing. And why be precious in the eyes of the Lord? It seems the opposite would be true.
That's a very good question. And I'll give you an answer, and we'll have to stop here for today because we're almost at the end of our time. Let me put it this way. In making the effort to understand God or ourselves or another person, even though we fail in the attempt, if it is a sincere attempt, that effort is precious. Our attempt to understand everything, to encounter the divine in its totality, mistaken though it may be in misidentifying what we have come up with the entirety, the effort to know that is precious. It is about the desire on our part to know and to improve and to grow. And even though we make a mistake along the way, which we inevitably will if we fall prey to one or another of these delusions, uh, doesn't invalidate our worth, or doesn't validate the process. Our worth is still precious, even though it ends in failure.
That's very beautiful.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I think that that's part of what is so important about this story and about the Jewish notion of growth. It's it is not a, it is not simply a failure if we don't get to the end, because getting to the end is not possible. What is possible is a full-hearted, authentic, self-conscious effort to move forward. And if we fall prey to mistakes along the way, that is not unexpected.
So pious is not doing the right thing necessarily, but having the right intention.
Well, what's the difference? Yeah, that's right. I mean, what is the difference between being pious and being, what's the word I want to use? Correct or right. Somebody who is pious has not completed the process. They are unsatisfied, dissatisfied with the state of things. They want something more. They expect there to be something more. To be pious means that we are in search of something that is beyond the status quo. So even though that's going to end in failure, even though human beings end in failure in this process of growth, of personal growth, or of our understanding of God, or in our attempts to build just and righteous systems and institutions and so forth, even though we're going to not reach the end of a process where perfection is realized, even though we do fail in that effort, we remain precious because it is the effort to pursue that track that is the most important thing. So, if I look at my own failings or the things that I fall short in and so forth, I could say, you know what, none of this matters. I might as well give it up, and because I'm never going to get to the end of this process. And when I do that, there is a kind of death that ensues. But that is to be avoided. Even the paradigm here is to accept incompletion, to accept the idea that we will never reach the end, and that even so, we are beloved. Even so, we are of infinite worth. Not only if we get to the end of the process. I think that's basically where this leads us, and I think that if it's okay with everybody, we will stop here for today and finish this passage for the next time. We all okay with that?
Yes. This
Yep.
was great today.
Yes, it
Well,
was.
thank you very much. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad to take this journey with you, and I'll look forward to next Friday.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, bye-bye, guys.